I just want to thank everyone for joining us this morning. My name is Paulette Brown-Hinds. I am publisher of the Black Voice News in Southern California and a senior fellow. And I am here with Sara Lomax, CEO of WURD Radio in Philadelphia and co-founder of URL Media. As CEO of Pennsylvania's only Black-owned talk station, she is credited with transforming it into a multimedia brand that provides cutting-edge original programming on air, online, and through community events. And URL Media is a network of Black and Brown-owned media outlets. Black Voice News is a proud member of URL Media, and they are building a network to share money, resources, and power. So thank you for joining us, Sara.
Thank you.
And our colleague and DJ for the morning, Lawrence Caswell. He's managing editor of Signal Cleveland, the new Ohio local news initiative. And as managing editor for Community, Lawrence leads the development of the newsroom's innovative, inclusive community journalism and oversees the newsroom's community reporting practices and the integration of Cleveland Documenters program. And we were, the three of us were all JSK Community Impact Fellows last year. And thank you both for joining me. We are also joined by Don Garcia, the director of the JSK, and Alberto Mendoza is also here. I'm actually taking over his office this morning for this conversation. So they are joining us as well. I want to just get right into it. Let's talk about how our careers really have been impacted by the fellowship and why we need more Black and BIPOC leaders in the program and other fellowship programs, right? Not just JSK. So I have some questions to pose. And since it's a free-flowing conversation, please feel free to pose questions of your own. And at about 1:30, I'll open it up for questions from the audience. So for the audience, please use the Q&A, if you have questions as they arise, and then we'll get to those questions 1:30. Sara, I'll start with you. What encouraged you to apply when you did? And had you ever applied before for the JSK Fellowship?
I had not ever applied for the JSK Fellowship or any other fellowship prior to applying for JSK. I think that I was encouraged by several people who had been in the program and knew about it, knew my work and kind of where I was in my career. And the fact that there was this opportunity for this Community Impact Fellowship, which at that point was all remote because of the pandemic, that kind of opened up the opportunity to me. I never really thought I could do a residential fellowship because my work is so hands-on in my community, which is Philadelphia. And so it would be real, and my work is so dependent on me to be very hands-on. So I didn't feel like I was a good candidate for a fellowship that required you to move and be on location for a set period of time, because I just didn't think I had that flexibility professionally. And so the Community Impact Fellowship that JSK, executed on was a perfect kind of hybrid opportunity for me at this point in my career.
Lawrence, what about you?
I have very similar experience. Like, I never applied to the JSK Community Impact Fellowship at Stanford or any other fellowship. I honestly I am definitely not a traditional journalist. I often, you guys know, describe myself as journalism adjacent. And I will say, just as a caveat, I don't see that as a negative. I see that as a plus. but it would not have even occurred to me to apply for a fellowship. So I really applied because of Rachel DeSalle, who is a reporter, journalist, who was part of the Cleveland Documenters core team, and we were really just like a year and a half into starting up Documenters when she came to me and suggested that I applied, and she was the one who convinced me, very much like Sarah's story. Although I also had the benefit of us in this very small like experiment, that was Cleveland Documenters, of watching Rachel in what was the first year of JSK Stanford's remote community impact fellowship, watching her be in that fellowship while we were building and imagining and building practices and principles for Cleveland Documenters, and watching her take what she was, like every week, watching her take what she was learning and take her experiences and apply that to the work that we were doing. So both like her convincing me and me being able to see really clearly the benefits of the JSK Fellowship, that's what convinced me to apply. And I wouldn't have done it otherwise. It wouldn't even, literally, if she had not said something to me, I would never have thought about it. So.
So I'm just talking a little bit about, like this point, talking about this kind of key moments in our careers, right? In your careers, I was in a similar kind of place where I was dealing with a kind of big issue for me. So publisher of the Black Voice News, Southern California, a 50-year-old, weekly newspaper, really, that I have been working for almost a decade to turn into this, kind of digital news organization, digital first news organization, doing a lot with data journalism and digital mapping, and really, not struggling, but working through that basically on my own. Mm-hmm. So I saw this fellowship as an opportunity to think more deeply about that kind of transformational work that I was involved in, but also to be connected to resources here, at Stanford. There were things that I was not aware of as I was, working in my little world, in my silo, like big local news, just a great resources at the Stanford libraries here, other initiatives and centers. And so I saw it as an opportunity really to kind of work through some of and to connect with great resources as I work through our transformation at Black Voice News. So I learned pretty quickly that the program is not just about your project, it's also developing us as professionals, right? Mm-hmm. I learned that quickly, but I'm really interested in learning a little bit more about the big problem that you were thinking about and working on during your time here. And then also about, like that professional development too. Sarah, I don't know, what project were you working on? I know it had to do with your work with WURD Radio.
Yeah, honestly, and I don't know if this is the right thing to say or not, but, I came in with one idea of a project, but it really evolved. And honestly, I did not emerge at the end of it with like executing on a project. It was more, the fellowship gave me an opportunity to deep breathe, like exhale and surround myself with like-minded people who were also leading community media organizations under a lot of, pressure and duress. And so one of the thing that I came in with was, how do I kind of transform this talk radio formatted station, which its superpower is really being in conversation with our community all the time, and be able to take those conversations and translate them into more journalistic breaking news opportunities. Like, how can we transform the organization to be more of a journalistic organization that builds on the interactivity with our audience all the time? So people are calling us or texting us or messaging us all the time about what's in their hearts and minds, what's happening in their communities. How do I take that and create journalism from that, as opposed to us kind of relying on the big white-led media organizations like the Inquirer and WHYY to do the journalistic stuff, and we kind of react to their stuff. We're on the ground in conversation with the community all the time. And so can we leverage that relationship to do more investigative and deep dive journalism? As you guys know, it's to create a news organization is it's an expensive, it's a big proposition. It's not just about writing the stories. It's also about the editors and the distribution and all of that. So, what really for me became central while I was a fellow was, how do I, not just from a journalism standpoint, but how do I leverage the power of what we do in terms of trust and engagement with our community to empower that community in more tangible ways? And one of the things was really trying to be a place that elevates conversations around joy and excellence and resilience, as opposed to just reacting to the last police shooting or the community violence or, some racist attack. Like, there's a lot of really heavy, intense news and information that we have a duty to kind of explore. But how do we also balance that out with the things that are beautiful and positive and affirming in our community and in our and use the station to lift that up as well, to kind of balance it out.
And so when you were coming into working on even your applying for this program and thinking through that, were those the big ideas that you were really thinking about, or was it once you got into the program and you spent more time, was that when you really started thinking more deeply about that?
No, I came in with this idea of how do we, leverage these conversations and this direct communication with our community on a daily basis. How do we leverage that to do more, investigative or just primary sourced reporting and writing? And that's something that we're still evolving into. But I think what also evolved out of that was realizing that we need some mental health kind of support. And that was something that I think was really beautiful about the fellowship, is that they centered kind of self-care, and they centered kind of wellness and making sure that we as leaders were whole. And I think that really, this growth mindset, that really impressed upon me the need to translate that not just to my staff, but also to my community that I'm serving, that we all need to be kind of, we need care and support and affirmation. And so I think that bringing that into the programming is something that I hadn't thought about coming into the program, but that's kind of what I left with.
Lawrence, I see you shaking. I see you nodding. You feel the same way.
Yeah, I feel the same way, particularly about that piece about like centering self-care, not just talking about it, but like making it a part of our like weekly practices in our gatherings, talking about it, like just like acknowledging that it's important. I feel like those are things that, if they're like, we know it like on its face, but like we usually find ourselves too busy to actually take that time. And so I appreciated that, all of that during that time. But for myself, for my project, I mean, in a similar way, my project I did not end up doing what I thought my project was going to be, which at least I knew coming in, because I had Rachel DeSalle, who had been a 2021 JSK fellow, that was not an uncommon thing. Like I didn't have that anxiety over me, but as I said, like we were like a year and a half into Cleveland Documenters when we started. And like Cleveland Documenters, we train and pay Greater Cleveland residents to document local government meetings. We were a really small team of 6, although we had this community of actually, then it was about 500, now it's about 600 residents trained to document local government meetings. And so I was really focused, and I imagined we were going to be a small team and do this sort of small project for a while. So, and not a project, but do this small work as Cleveland Documenters for the foreseeable future. So I really came in thinking, all right, we have this great large community. We've done a little community building. Like I was thinking, like, let's come in, like, what do I need to do to really tend to our core? How can I get our core more engaged and get them more active in the ways that we are seeing distributing civic information and allowing government to be more transparent and all these things that Cleveland Documenters was doing. However, pretty much at the same time that the fellowship started, we began conversations with a couple of funders, the American Journalism Project and the Cleveland Foundation, initially about partnering with a new nonprofit newsroom that they were looking at creating. And then, I don't know, maybe a month or a month and a half into the fellowship, that became the idea, at least potentially, of us running that newsroom. And then that slowly became the idea of us building this new kind of newsroom around the work that Cleveland Documenters had been doing for that year and a half or so. And so that was a lot for me, particularly as someone who, like, I've rarely been in a management position. I didn't see myself as a leader in journalism. I mean, I thought this project, I knew what I wanted to do with my career in Cleveland, which is really building civic and social infrastructure in the city of Cleveland to strengthen democracy. But I did not come into this thinking like, oh, I'm going to run a newsroom. And so all of my plans and projects really blew up over, I mean, you guys watched it, it blew up over the course of that entire fellowship. And so I really feel like at the end, my project was me. And the sessions we had talking to you guys, I mean, I feel like the biggest thing in that case, and I mean, for the topic that we're talking about, being Black and in journalism in this fellowship, imposter syndrome is not a little thing, particularly when you're all of a sudden there's funding and there's a giant project and you're talking about leading it or being part of the team leading it. It kind of messed with my mind for a minute, and it took me a long time to really wrap my brain around what is my role in this, how do I see myself in this, and I mean, on the back end, I don't know how I would have done that without the space and reflection of the JSK Fellowship. But not just that. I mean, the sessions were with Dikla, on leadership and all these things. They were great, but more than anything else, it was being in community with all of you in the fellowship, seeing how you saw me. Allowed me to see myself and know that I was in the right position to be doing what I was doing. I mean, I started this off talking about me being journalism adjacent, and I think I felt somewhat self-conscious about that at the start. Now, I mean, I still say that I'm journalism adjacent, but now I feel confident enough in my beliefs and my sort of position to know that's actually what we need. The problems in journalism aren't just problems in journalism. They're problems with local information systems. They're problems with local democracy. They're all of these problems, and they're not going to be fixed with folks in journalism. So the idea of me being journalism adjacent isn't a negative, isn't a knock. It's exactly what we need. And I don't know that I would have gotten to that as quickly in this position where I'm now a managing editor community for Signal Cleveland, a pretty big nonprofit newsroom that just launched a couple of weeks ago. I don't know that I would feel as confident with where I'm at, and if it had not been for JSK. So, like I said, my project was me in the end.
So I want to stick with that for just a minute, and then Sara, I want you to be thinking about why the fellowship mattered to you at this point in your career, as a kind of senior professional. But back to the guy Lawrence, when you say my project was me, it gave you this time, the space, and time for reflection, which is so important. And I think during our regular, cadence of life, we don't stop enough to reflect. And I've talked to Don about that just recently. We just have this barrage of either conversations as you do interviews or reading things and thinking about things, but you don't really stop to reflect, and it really need that time. And this kind of fellowship gives you that opportunity. But you mentioned being in community and with others. And I just wanted to know if you could just speak briefly about just what role the cohort played in that, project of Lawrence Caswell.
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, to sort of explain it, I sort of feel like I need to explain myself. Like, I've never actually been a reporter. I worked at a public broadcasting company for a long time, about 11 years, and have been doing live radio my whole adult life, like approaching 30 years or so now. But I was rarely in a position of leadership. I felt like for lots of that time, I was the grunt. My input wasn't really valued, and I knew what I wanted to do, and I knew what I was thinking. But like, that's not when it is the common in your work for you not to be valued. It's not just easy to be a value, to say I'm a value right away. You can say it all you want on paper, but it really is important. And I don't think I realized it until a few months into the fellowship, how much showing up with this group of people that I respected so much and whose work I loved, and particularly our cohort, which is so focused in exactly the space that I'm focused on really such a large focus on community focused journalism, a little bit of collaborative journalism throughout all of us, like the respect that I had for all of us. And then to have you all see when I would say something, I almost want to roll back. I feel like it was relatively common for me in my professional career to say things and not feel hurt. To say something and be looked at like I was crazy or I was whatever, or even worse, just the Black guy saying some cool stuff. You know what I'm saying? Like utterly dismissed by way of a sort of compliment. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's a large part of my career. So to be in the room with all of us, the Zoom room, just like we are right now, and to talk with very little setup and have you guys hear and respond to what I'm saying. It was really huge for me, having not had that professional experience at all. And I don't really know how you move forward leading other people, building other things, unless you kind of you need to see yourself reflected to be able to move forward. We talk about this with representation in movies and film, but but it's not just representation, but it's that seeing how you see yourself reflected is super important. Super important. It wasn't like I saw myself, being in community with the cohort didn't make me think of myself differently. It made me feel more secure in how I saw myself, if that makes sense. And that is one of the most valuable things I got from the fellowship, relatively quickly, to be honest.
Yeah, that's great. Sara, what about you in terms of just, why it matters to you at this point in your career?
Well, I will get to that, but I just think that what Lawrence said, and he said that a few times during during the fellowship, and that just strikes me as so tragic that, and you're not tragic at all, but it's tragic that somebody as brilliant as you, Lawrence, would go through your career feeling unheard and unseen. And I think that is the experience of so many Black people, particularly. So being in a room, being in a program that validates your brilliance and says you are a part of a community a community of excellence, just by being in the program. You don't have to, just the fact that you were selected is signaling and underscoring that you are valued and you should be heard, and what you have to say is important. So I just wanted to say that because I had the exact same experience. I did a program a few years ago, and I came into it, and it was media leaders from all over the world. And I was, my family owns this, in my mind, dinky, Black talk radio station in Philly. I felt so small. Mm-hmm. So I was in the room with CNN and ABC and NPR and all of these ballers, these big, and that was the first time that people looked at me and were like, whoa, you are actually doing stuff that we are only thinking about. You're actually ahead. And I was like, what? So the value in my career, to your question, Paulette, the value of JSK at this point in my career is the same thing, because as a Black seasoned, and thank you for using seasoned, as a Black seasoned media professional, I've gone through my entire career feeling undervalued, unheard, because Black media has always been undervalued, appreciated, all of it. It's been, the systemic racism that exists in America, it is felt everywhere. It's felt in every industry, every setting. And so, to be leading a Black focused, owned media outlet has meant that, you are less than, because, I don't have New York Times, Washington Post, LA Times. I don't have that on my resume. I have, that I've run and grown Black media for 30 years. And I would say only recently, like after the racial justice protests and all that happened after 2020 and the execution of George Floyd, I think that there has been a shift in recognizing that our outlets do matter and that they do have value. And I think that the Community Impact Fellowship was a nod towards acknowledging that community media, Black media, brown media, journalists of color, have a central role to play in the media ecosystem overall. And so, the other piece that I would say, because it was a very intergenerational cohort, our JSK cohort. I was probably on the older end and the more, seasoned, experienced, whatever you want to call it, end of the spectrum. And I found there was such respect and everyone listened to everyone. There was no one who was in that room or in these sessions who, had the answers to everything or felt like, I don't think anyone felt like they didn't have anything to contribute. And I think that because we were all at different points in our careers but we were all deeply invested in this community media, we were able to learn. I was able to learn from younger media leaders around, what they're going through and how they're approaching things from a Gen Z or a millennial perspective, and they were hopefully able to garner, glean from me things that are, that come just from time, from experience. So I loved the fact that there was this intergenerational dynamic and everyone was there on kind of a level, equal playing field.
100%.
That's like such a great point, Sara. I know for me, as someone like you, Sara, second generation owner of a media organization, undervalued organization, and really trying to do some innovative work and feeling very alone in that space. I found that the cohort, was, and I think there's a kind of a joke about how, the kind of the magic of the selection of the people you put together. But I just felt like when we had our first session and listening to everyone's stories, kind of where they are, what they're working on, I just saw these instant connections with both of you, of course, other members of the cohort. And, for me, it was like, okay, great, I need to talk to this person about this, or understanding documenters, for instance, was something that my staff had been talking about. Like, how do we, have more coverage of, some of the city council meetings or some of the school board meetings, right? And knowing that as we talked more and more to and interviewed more and more of our audience, our community, that's one of the things they wanted. They wanted to understand what was happening with local government. And so documenters is something like, I knew about, but didn't know who to even talk to. I remember Lawrence being able to connect you with, Stephanie, my editor, and then for us to really be thinking through how can we, run that type of program, at in Riverside and San Bernardino counties. And then, Sara and I got a chance to get to know each other, and I got to learn about URL media and get to join that network. And I'm really excited. It's just starting, but really excited about, working in collaboration with other newsrooms that are doing similar work across the country. And I think just recently our editor was featured on a newscast with other members. Yeah. So it was just like, I just saw it shared on social, but really expanding our network as well. So for me, it was, really important. I was not just excited and appreciative that I was a part of this cohort, but really excited about the deep relationships that developed. I saw in the Q&A already, Jeff King did a little, he's watching us, and, Jeff is doing just great work and impactful work in Vallejo, and we're in Southern California, and we're like, how do we, work together? We still are, in constant communication. So it provided a community for me. It really did. One of the things I, wanted to just ask both of you is, since the world started opening up and we're starting to meet more in person, and I've been amazed at the number of professionals who are JSK alum. Like, it's just like this constant, or people who just reached out, because they saw that, I was a JSK alum or JSK fellow. And they're really doing really innovative, creative things in the journalism space and the, civic information space. Have you found that it's expanded your network as well? I'm curious to see what your experience has been so far.
I can speak to that a little bit. I mean, I don't know that I felt like it's expanded my network in the way that you're talking, but mostly because after leaving JSK, like, we immediately started this newsroom, and so my head's been down, focused on that. But I will say to this other point about sort of information sharing and trying to be an innovative newsroom, or really sort of creating new models of journalism, new models of community journalism, and of collaborative journalism. And I will say, having tried to do that with Cleveland Documenters, and then moving Cleveland Documenters into Signal Cleveland, and trying to do that really on a larger scale, it has been such a great resource to be able to have, particularly our cohort, this many folks all together, really focused on community journalism, really focused on collaborative journalism. And when you're in this space and you're trying to invent new ways of doing things, adjusting old ways, or trying to apply sort of new functions of journalism that are maybe meeting what old bits of journalism did, but in a new way, it can be really lonely. And I feel like, had I not had both the JSK cohort, but at the same time, the sort of growing documenters network. Now we have documenters programs. I mean, they were already in Chicago, Cleveland, Detroit, Minneapolis, Omaha, Atlanta, some of them also in our cohort, yes, Canopy, Atlanta, and Omaha. I have these two different communities of folks who are all like experimenting and iterating and trying to innovate and thinking through community-focused collaborative journalism with a lot of different methods. And like, that is a resource to be able to be like, I'm thinking about this thing, and to have this whole group of people to like throw the question out to and get a response and get perspectives, it speeds things up so much. Because otherwise, you're just sitting there looking at an outline on a piece of paper, trying to figure out if you're saying, does this make sense? Is this right? Am I doing it right? Like just having that, we got so much further. And I say that from the start. Like I took things that we talked about, like the conversations that I had with us here, immediately to documenters and immediately applied it. And that has just happened again and again. There's not like a 2-week period where I haven't reached out to someone in either the documenters network or our cohort to ask a question for some input and then got something that was super useful. And the input's varied. It's not the same. We're all working on similar things, but in different ways. And honestly, that's a great sort of resource to have to pull from sort of a related toolbox. Like I'm thinking about it this way. This other person's thinking about it this way. I can pull from both of those and put them together into something that works for me. And that is not, you don't just get that. Like it's hard to, you'll be hard pressed to find a group of folks who are like that in another situation. I honestly would even say in another fellowship. Like I don't think I would have found the same group of folks really that focused and dedicated to community reporting, community journalism, maybe even collaborative journalism, outside of our cohort and maybe the previous cohort of the JSK Community Impact Fellowship. Although I do hope that is the case for JSK going forward, because it was super valuable to me. I mean, I know I've said this a couple of times, but I don't see how we're at where we're at with Signal Cleveland. A couple of weeks from our soft launch and feeling good about where we're going if we don't have that. And it wasn't just me that it helped. It helped our entire team, our entire organization. So, yep. So
right.
The network, building that network, not in the way that you were meaning, but yeah, it was super crucial to me.
No. I mean, I think that no, you're speaking to the multiple networks too,
Yes.
right? You know, you mentioned Sanam and Canopy Atlanta. Now Atlanta is part of the Documenters program.
Mm-hmm.
I know Sara. My path would cross with Sara. I was in like accelerator programs but I didn't get to know her until at JSK. And even though our program was remote, Sara came out to California, got a chance to see her. And then now that things have opened up, we've just been in some of the same cities at the same time, doing some of the same work. Sara, what about you in terms of just your network and the JSK alum network?
Yeah, I think that I see it most with the URL network. URL is, as you mentioned, it's a network of Black and Brown media organizations that come together to share content, amplify each other's content, and share revenues as a way to create more sustainability for BIPOC media. And, Black Voice News is a part of it. My radio station, WURD, is a part of it. And what I see with JSK and URL and in general is there's a common language. There's a common way of there's a common experience and a common framework of how to approach problems, how to navigate through different situations. And so I think that that's very, very powerful in terms of the lingering impact of JSK is that you are able to connect with people and I think kind of it's a shortcut to connecting with people when you know that they've gone through this very transformative program, because there's certain, like I said, common language, common training, common learnings that we've all had. So and I think that the community is really dynamic. There's just a really incredible alumni network that we can plug into to help troubleshoot and just connect with.
There's one last question. And you mentioned trying transformational or transformative experience. And we've kind of talked a little bit about, the different sessions. I think somebody mentioned a DICLA session on leadership, right? I'm curious about what the most impactful, sessions were for you. But also a question about, I have a question about like the coaching you received too. We all had, we're assigned a director. It's been great to help me. For me, it wasn't, as we mentioned at the very beginning of this, it wasn't just about my project I was working on. There were things where I just really needed to take time to change my kind of daily practice, right? Like, we talked, and I keep notes on, I have like these Post-it notes from different sessions that I keep at my desk. And even if it's just reminding me to breathe or reminding me to kind of stop, Sarah, sometimes just that kind of stopping, planting your feet, breathing, focusing. Daily practices that are important for our well-being are things that I really talked a lot about with Dawn as my kind of my director that I worked with. And then, we had great sessions, the D-School session with Tron, and really using design thinking in our work was something that, stuck with me. I actually shared that with my whole team. And I'm curious about, both of you, conversation about, questions about your most impactful session for you, or if you wanted to talk about, the coaching you received. And that would be like our last question, and then we'll close it out.
I'll jump in. I remember one of our sessions was with the kind of the speech and communications guru, and he shared with us a series of videos to kind of illustrate his point. And our cohort really pushed back. We kind of made I wouldn't say a stink, but we really questioned his selection of videos and that were demonstrating how you communicate effectively. And they seem to all be kind of in some way homogenous in terms of race and other things. And as a cohort, we were all kind of like, that doesn't fly. And we shared that back with the leadership team, and they asked us to select our own videos of powerful speeches that we thought really demonstrated effective communication and getting a point across. And so we each put together our own video clips. And to me, that represented a couple of things that I thought was really powerful. One, that we were aligned as a team, as a cohort, that it didn't feel right the way that our presenter was presenting to us. And we felt empowered to share that back with the leadership. The leadership, in turn, shifted things around and said, well, we hear you, we see you, we're going to change the next session so that we can respond back to your concerns. And then the mix of speeches and presentations that we came up with was amazing. And it was so it was so illustrative of our diversity and of our creativity and of who we were and what we found powerful. And so that was an experience that I thought spoke to a lot of different dimensions of the program.
I mean, I know we've talked about Dikla Carmel Hurwitz's leadership sessions a bunch, but I cannot say enough about those sessions, particularly for me as someone who really didn't coming into it think of myself as a leader and wasn't in a management position, but now someone who has managing in my title and is managing a number of folks. Has a number of direct reports. I mean, both now and then, honestly, every session of Dikla's, I was taking some tool or some pearl or some way of thinking about a problem immediately back to the team. Like I don't think there's been a week since we started this that I have not very practically used something that Dikla taught us, or don't think about it specifically. And this is not like, I'm not like even going back and like looking at my notes or looking at other things. These issues are coming up and I'm remembering, oh, I remember Dikla saying this. That's a pinch. I should deal with that right now instead of waiting for that to get deeper. Or what should my role be? I mean, just even the concept. I remember her first session with us was really, we talked about leadership styles, and I was all getting ready to be told that like, oh, these leadership styles are good and these leadership styles are blah blah blah. But after sort of doing that reading of leadership styles, Dikla was like, none of these styles are styles for or just one style for a leader. Like a real leader is looking at the situation and saying, what is the appropriate role for me to play right now? That was super instructive. And I feel like I'm making that decision every day. On the other side, on the coaching and mentorship side, I've never had a mentor, professional or otherwise, in my life or career. And honestly, Alberto could not have been more on time, particularly with his nonprofit experience, with fundraising experiences. As I was in the situation of being at a small nonprofit, like collaborative journalism project that was talking about partnering and then was like strategizing how we might run this new big nonprofit newsroom in the city while maintaining our vision and like all of these like sort of complex things to then all of a sudden be like discussing over hours, over months. Have Alberto's perspective was super useful. I mean, useful at the moment. Like we met and I immediately got off and then got into a meeting. We were talking about something where I used something that he took, like something that he told me or applied something that we were talking about. I mean, it was immediately useful. And I cannot, I don't know where I would be if I didn't have all of that, right now. Like I would be much more lost than I am now. So.
I just want to throw out one little thing about the coaching, because Dawn was my coach as well. And what I really appreciated about our sessions was she was like, look, you can talk about anything. It doesn't have to be about a work issue or some type of professional thing. And during the fellowship, I was going through a lot personally. And so a number of our sessions were not about work. They were more about just her listening and empathizing and just being a resource and a support for me as a person. And that was really amazing.
Yeah, I found for me also like an accountability partner, because that's been great, because it was like, oh yeah, I have like these, working on this big project, or you have these big ideas, but you need to like break them into manageable, right, elements. And then you need to put some timelines on those and deadlines. And so that was, I think, a great, asset for me, was having someone who was like, okay, so you're going to do this. What date are you going to do it by? And then knowing that I had to have it ready for that next conversation, right? So it was really helpful for me. And then something that I try to work into now, the work with my team and making sure that, everyone kind of has an accountability partner so that we can all, achieve the success we're trying to achieve. I really appreciate spending, the last hour with both of you. Really miss seeing you weekly. But Lawrence, I will make my way back out to Cleveland, and hopefully
I'll be here.
Be as busy now that you're fully in your role.
This is my hope. I just need to be like 10% less busy, and then I'm good.
And Sarah, I know we'll see each other. We'll see each other soon. We want to encourage everyone to apply for the JSK Fellowship program or other fellowships, but the deadline for the JSK Fellowship, the US deadline, is January 25th, 2023. I can't believe 2023. And it is at 1 p.m. Pacific time. The JSK directors have been hosting information sessions. There will be links, link in the chat, and if, with the recording, you also see link in the notes. And we want to encourage you to watch those sessions as well as register for the live FAQ session that will be held January 11th, 2023. You can go to the JSK website, go to the section that says to become a fellow. It's underlined in red. You can find the FAQs there, and you can find the webinar recordings there as well. And Lawrence, you're gonna play us out. I want to thank the staff, JSK staff, for all the work they did on this. Thank you to the directors, Sarah, Lawrence, so good to see you. Happy holidays to everyone, and hope to see you with the information session in the new year.